video closed so that we will not have any data related issue. So just to start the module, if you have you gone through the syllabus and do you know what are the things we are going to discuss on in module 1? Any idea? Okay. This is a class, and the topics we need to discuss about is the origin of life, characteristics of life, Linean and Whittaker system of classifications, um, overall classifications of plant kingdoms, then plant structures, types, their modifications. Also, we need to learn how the animal kingdoms are classified. Okay, so we do not delay much. So I'll actually first start with the characteristic, then origin. So the sequence overall may be a bit hodgepodge, but I think we are going to cover all of it. We have covered all of it. We are in revision also. We are going to cover all of it. I'll start with the characteristics of life. So um, there are many characteristics of life. One of the characteristics is growth. Growth. Okay, any non-living things don't grow other than crystals. Crystals can grow by taking substances from whatever is around. Their mass can increase, their numbers can increase. Um, so as living systems. Um, uh, Here, in living systems, we have limitations in the growth. Plants can grow to an unlimited mass of unlimited size, unlimited mass. Animals are restricted, very much restricted. I can say not all animals, but 90%, 90 to 99% animals are restricted to have a limited size. But some animals, they are allowed to grow to unlimited size, but naturally they can't because there are predators, prey, those story works. So they are not allowed to grow, in fact, to very large size. For example, earthworm. Earthworm itself can grow to very large size if it is simply not disturbed to do anything. But you have a lot of predators for the earthworm itself. Okay, unicellular organisms don't grow in size much, but meaning those organisms has got one cell, they grow only in numbers. So this is how growth is all about. And in this terms, we are a bit of similar to that of some non-living things like crystals. Then what are the characteristics? Reproduction is one characteristic. Okay, we have sexual, asexual, vegetative reproductions. Another characteristic is metabolism. We did discuss detailed on metabolism in the last couple of classes. So these are the sum of all anabolic and molecule making and molecule breaking reactions, which is happening in our body. So overall metabolism. So in the and the characteristics is having different forms and factors, and of course compartmentalization of things. So muscle cells look long, elongated. Liver cells look cuboidal in nature. So each cell, at cellular level itself, different forms are there. Um, okay. So and for having a cell also, the subcellular components are really compartmentalized. That's what it meant. So can we define life with these specific characteristics? Self-replicating. Okay. Yes, it can grow and divide more in number. Okay, I think let's hope they join. Thanks for posting, students. Um, while defining, We use self-replicating term, which is synonymous to growth and, of course, your reproduction. Self-regulating is metabolism with response to external stimuli. We call this term as homeostasis. Okay, homeostasis meaning you regulate yourself in response to the environment. Okay, so if the oxygen level is going down in hills and mountains, you start breathing faster to maintain the oxygen level. So that's called self-regulating mechanism. Okay, so these are some characteristics and certain very encompassing definition which can tell you the story of life. This is the characteristics of life. You see these characteristics in any kind of object, you can term it as a living organism. If you remember here, we are not defining it. It is nitrogen based, carbon based. We are not defining it that term that way. Okay, and if it is evolving, yes, it is evolving. So um, another thing has a similar characteristics, which is although artificial. If you remember your artificial intelligence, any programs written on artificial intelligence, they if they are programmed to self-replicate, they can do. The programs can do actually. Like artificial intelligence viruses, they can self-replicate. They evolve, of course, they evolve, and of course, they can self-regulate themselves or learn more in response to external stimuli. Can we call them living? um, as of yet, as they do not have a matter, okay, that's the information they can do, uh, but they are not matter based, okay. So that's why we cannot consider them particularly living, but yes, they are partially living in according to the definition. So now coming to the origin of life, there are three varieties of origin of lives which we people have imagined as of yet, right from the origin of our species itself and the origin of civil society or maybe society which is able to think. Um, in that way, initially people derived God to be the origin of life. I didn't have much slides on that because you can get anything for regarding this theistic origin. Theistics meaning God. Okay, thei meaning God actually. Then we have biotic and abiotic origins of life. Now, if we do not believe that God have created life, then we have these two alternative theories we can have. And later, scientifically, people started believing that we can have a biotic or abiotic origin of life. So, biotic origin of life, for abiotic origin of life, let's start with abiotic, meaning there is no initial living organism on the earth, and it has the life has been created from chemicals or basic gases and water, whatever present on earth. And so initially the idea was proposed by Oparin and Halden. Halden was a Britisher and Oparin, I think, was a Russian scientist. But they independently proposed this. And Halden actually, he named this idea as a Halden's soup. He said that out of simple molecules like hydrogen, water, ammonia, and methane, carbon dioxide, the environment which earlier, your Earth, early Earth had, in that environment, there wasn't free oxygen there. And that time also, there could be certain chances of origin of some special molecules of the life. What they believe is life is living system is a it also encompasses your cell theory also. So if living systems are masses of cells which are operating with a very immaculate regulation among each other, then individual cells are actually balls of small chemical factories where different chemicals are being processed and they are converted from one form to another. And if it is a chemical factory, these individual chemicals, are organic chemicals, they could be formed from far more simpler chemicals. In our body, which we do in a plant can take simplest carbon dioxide to convert it to polysaccharides, oligosaccharides, monosaccharides. So it can do this. This mechanism is still there. Why can't it happen spontaneously without any biological involvement? Halden said that yes, that could have been possible in that warm, oxygen-free environment. The first thing which could have formed out of various random reactions could be a Halden soup, often called Kostervet model, where certain complex chemicals are developed. Then it triggered development of more complex chemicals. Then that also again further triggered formation of far more complex chemicals or molecules, which finally can self-regulate and show some sign of life. Now, there were scientists who believed on their theory, and this was a vague theory though, and on the basis of organic chemistry. After almost 30 years, there were some scientists, Urey and his student Miller. Urey believed it earlier. He was somewhere contemporary to Halden and Oparin. But until he get his student, again his student joined very late to his lab, and they started working on their theory and they designed certain experiments on this. So they created compositions of life here with methane gas, ammonia. These are simplest gases they could add. There are many ratios, but these ratios yielded something, and the temperature was really very high, that is 1073 Kelvin, which is near about 800 degrees Celsius, and of course 75,000 or 75 kilovolt of electric discharges. Now, this electric discharges are simulating your, what do you say, your lightning. Okay, that time we didn't have a ozone layer, so highly oxidized. All UV rays are falling on the surface of Earth. Often it is, if there is water, if water is there, there could have been vapors, and vapors, this vapor could have formed cloud, and clouds are producing lightning. Even in lightning can be produced in even in Jupiter's cloud where we do not have water also. So yeah, that's very much possibility. It's not only water can carry charges, water molecules. Um, but when what you see here is this is the place where reaction is happening, and this place is being heated up. Vapors are getting reactions. The resultant chemicals are being collected. This kept on, going for days and months, and they collected finally the chemicals. They got a black tar, but when they isolated things, they found a lot of organic polymers, amino acids, which are actually building blocks of life. Fatty acids. Um, so they found very complex molecules. Still, there are many things which are not yet been recognized, but many scientists have reopened their vials. Their vials are very safely kept because these are certain unknown samples, uh, and they are being analyzed now. That means this is one way of understanding how life could have formed in a completely lifeless Earth surface. And is that only place in our solar system? There could be many lifeless planets which are very much in the distance of wait. Um, just hold on a second, guys. Yes, guys. So this is about abiotic origin. It's a detailed way we just showed. Then there is this the time at which the life has originated. This is a video you can see for understanding the relevance of Urey-Miller experiment. Um, then evidences of life which is originated probably more than 3 billion years earlier. They got certain rocks which got some early form of which bacteria called cyanobacteria and often called stromatolites. So they found that's a very nice way. See, in dinosaurs, you can find a fossil very easily because the bones are big, and finding a bacteria in a rock it's very difficult. But any rock, if you go for analysis, if you find carbonates in the rock, you can think that there could be they could have been activity of living forms. Okay, and there is a very unusual ratio between carbon 13 and 14. If living tissue some point it was there. Okay, the carbonate living forms actually accumulate less, uh, very specific systems. They accumulate less isotopic carbons than the normal carbon. Okay, so in nature we can have a particular ratio, but in living systems we can have less of carbon 13. Okay, and that way you can really see that this ratio, uh, even the rock belongs to very nascent earth, when nascent life forms were occurring, which are single cell, very much single cell, but they can give you a signature out of this carbon 13. And later on, once they found that this could be a rock where we can find some traces of cells, they actually polished the rock and they saw certain traces here of a different carbonate building up here. This is the mapping. So what we understood is life somewhere, whether it is abiotic origin or biotic, it must have originated from somewhere 3.45 billion. We normally consider 3.8 billion, almost a billion year later than the Earth formation itself from the sun. So this is how we saw this evidence. This is a website we visited, and in Australia we found this evidences. Now there is evidences for biotic origins also. There are certain life forms which are actually extremophiles, and these are again bacteria, kind of bacteria. We call them archaebacteria or archaea. Uh, but you see that they can stay in very hard or harsh conditions. Early life forms, early form of Earth was very harsh anyway. They could. So, what what is an evidence here is that they uh, could have come through a meteorite bombardment to the earth. Meteorite bombardment often, increases the risk of burning or heat damaging living forms if it is there in a meteorite. Anything entering into your, that's one of the reason why Kalpana Chawla died. Their re-entry shield didn't work. Um, she was an astronaut, and while returning from the space, their heat shield didn't work properly and they burnt out. Uh, Same thing happens to any organism which is traveling from a different planet source. Chunk of a planet is coming out in the form of a meteorite and getting bombarded on the Earth. They often catch fire and often, the heat can kill the life forms. But if life forms are extremophiles, they can resist high temperature. Then the chances of the extremophiles are of getting completely killed is not very plausible. Okay, that means a meteorite could have actually deposited some life forms on Earth in the early Earth when Earth just cooled down, and at that time you have to put the seed in a fertile land. Then only your seed will grow. If the land is not fertile, whatever seeds you implant, it will not grow. So probably after a billion years after cooling the Earth's surface is fertile enough to receive the seeds of life through meteorites. This is another theory, and there are certain evidences like yes, meteorites can bring in life forms on Earth. Um, there isn't much of direct evidence, but we can see these organisms which are these are extremophiles. You see, thermophilus, cryophiles, and they can stay alive in minus uh, 50-degree temperatures. They can stay alive in amidst rocks, you know, compressed within rocks also they can stay alive. So these are called extremophiles picture. They are actually they do not cause diseases, but they are there in our body. Also, a lot of archibacteria are there. Plus, normal bacteria, which normally cause diseases, also they are one kind of condition called the endospores. You know, if they form an egg out of a microbes, they can also suggest. They can also stay alive with these harsh conditions. May not be burning conditions, but at least the freezing condition they can survive, pressure they can survive, temperature until boiling water temperature they can survive, but beyond that it's difficult for them to survive. But the archibacteria with their spores they can survive. So these are certain evidences where we can have biotic origin. Probably the real thing what had happened is some mixture of biotic, abiotic. You never know. Um those things. So this is about origin of life, and then if we have our life originated since 3.5 billion years ago. Now, how diverse life forms are. If they started as a bacteria, why didn't they stay as a bacteria, right? These are certain questions are there. We'll understand those answers in the evolution portion. But now we can see whatever life forms exist on the surface of Earth, we all need to have a scientific inquiry on that. That's why we need to have a proper scientific name to every organism. That is why we need to classify living forms and of course name. So in chemistry we have learned about nomenclature, and there used to be ethyl alcohol, ethanol, and why they need to be called ethyl alcohol, um, why they why we need to call ethanoic acid to acetic acid, because all organisms may not sorry all scientists who want to do research in chemistry may not be familiar with the terms and terms of your local company, to be more specific. That's why they made IPS in nomenclature, which can be very scientific in nature, and that way from the name itself you can understand what kind of chemical is that, what are the bonds it has, uh, similarly in case of animals and plants also we need the proper nomenclature systems. Like here you have three frogs, all three frogs look similar, and this is the um, difference. You can see that. And what are the difference? Even at the order level, they are same. Order, class, kingdom, phylum, class, order. Until that, they are same. But family changes. Ranidae, Racoporidae, and their properties are completely different. These are This is a wood frog, and this is a tree frog, the poison dart frog. This frog, if you touch it and rub in your eyes, you will die instantly. So in South Amazon area, they make poison darts out of these frogs, secretions. This frog, you completely freeze it, okay? Make an ice cream out of it, and when you unfreeze it, it will come alive. So, um, although all three are frog, but we needed to know them very specifically, pinpoint them very specifically. That's why we need to have their proper classification system. Um, so, these are the needs we discussed
Sir,
about, and yes.
sir, we are supposed to learn all the specific things of these frogs and all.
You can study a bit on the frog. I'm not giving you all the species you have to learn. At least, what do you say? Which point they are different. I will come to that. That at least we have to differentiate these organisms in terms of kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species, right? So genus, species, you know that. And this is an open book exam. I think, Dharmik, you do not have to worry more about it. If I am
Oh, okay,
asking
sir.
anything, you will have that in your module. You can always look it back and you can answer. Only
Okay.
thing I will discourage is do not talk to each other. See, if somebody gets a wrong notion about an answer, that answer starts replicating,
Yeah, sir.
and that way you may lose a lot of money. So I think it's an open book exam. I will take my freedom of asking you weird questions, and you have to find the answers from the slides. Okay, it's not blind question. If it is blind, I would have asked you write a note on something like that, and you would have written it. So at least here I am expecting you to, write when you see the material. My suggestion, when you go to their exams, you take a printout of your slides. Okay, remember that.
Sir,
Now,
but
yes.
there are more than 70 to 80 pages.
No, my suggestion is that per page you can actually stuff 4 slides, something like that. You can do that. Okay,
Okay, sir.
slides can be stuffed into a single page. 4 slides can be done, and still it will be legible. As it is not a book, I'm saying for slides we need to give more slides because some concepts need to be explained well. Okay. Um, So, so overall science of naming organisms, we call them the science as taxonomy. Okay, taxon meaning a kind of group of organisms. Okay. And most importantly, we have a special kind of nomenclature system for every organism. As IPSC name, it has names for the change in name for the bond, change in name for the kind of group it is attached. Um, but the final name of a living organism doesn't carry that. Okay, the final name which normally you pronounce is a binomial nomenclature, as if you are naming, any human being, right? The binomial nomenclature, meaning it should contain its genus name and it should contain its family name. You can imagine similar way in your name also. In North India, we have our first name as our species name to be first, and then we have our family name. In South India, they have family name first, and personal name or first name later. But it is all the same. I just give me a second. I got a call from the HR. Hello. Yes, I think I'm in. So we discussed about this binomial nomenclature. Here, genus and species are the two scientific names which incorporates, and immediately when you want to refer to any organism, you refer organism with their binomial nomenclature. But to know exactly the place in that, that the whole IPSC scientific name comes into picture. Here you have to tell about the kingdom, phylum, class. That way you can actually understand individual factors do have its specific characteristics. Animalia has its own specific characteristics. Phylum Chordata has its own. So characteristics wise, we have separated them. We can separate individual organisms into different taxa. We can say taxons. Okay. Who initiated this classification process? In fact, Aristotle himself also initiated. It was somewhere 400, 500 BC. But most formal way of classification and a proper record on classification was done by Carolus Linnaeus. He was a Swedish biologist, and he published his work on as a book, and it's named Systema Naturae, meaning a system of classification of natural organisms. Okay, that's why he is called also called the father of taxonomy, modern taxonomy. Fine. So what did he incorporated? He incorporated genus, species. The binomial nomenclature is his idea. He incorporated orders, phylums for orders and phylums also. Okay. So um, so these are some more details of that. You can read it up. But there had been a lot of incorporations on that. The two all modern classifications are based on Carolus Linnaeus system of classifications, but the uh, final classification contains phylum, phyla, and family. That is the two names additionally we have in the Carolus, a modern system of classification. Scaleless lineages did not have, they had kingdom but no phylum. They had kingdom, then class, order, and genus, species. Now, the modern system has incorporated phylum and family. Okay, so this is the basic idea of classifications. This is a way you can do. See, when you go to a larger group, like larger taxa, that is the kingdom, uh, you can have lot of species, lot of organisms you can define in them, and there are specific characteristics for them. But when you zero down to the species, you are exactly referring to a single species. What is a species, and now what are the family? The very basic characteristics of a species is that we have subspecies also. See, our name, human organism, as an organism, we have subspecies. So we are actually Homo sapiens sapiens. Okay, so these define so that within subspecies, individual organisms can mate with each other and produce viable organisms. But um, if it is within genus and if it is of different species, it cannot do. The organisms may be produced, and but the organisms may not be viable or may not be fertile themselves. Like liger and tylon, I gave examples. You can always do that. Search about it. So the best, easiest way of remembering these seven orders or seven taxons, we can say kingdom. For King Philip came over for grandma soup. Okay, it's an easier way when you have non-open book or real-time examinations, then you can use this technique to remember this seven species. Okay. Here for lion it is Panthera leo, for tiger it is Panthera tigris. So here you see the genus is same, but the species is different. If you can mate with a lion with a tiger, you can get a organism, but that organism will not be fertile. Same thing happens with horse and a donkey. So mules are, results of horse and donkey mating, but mules are infertile in nature. They cannot have babies of their own. Now, coming to the further classifications, we have diversities, many diversities to incorporate within simply two kingdoms. So that's why there had been a lot of other researchers who came and proposed different kingdom systems, and finally we were locking on into the Whitaker system of classification, which is a five kingdom classification, where simple animal and plant will not incorporate. We understand bacteria looks very different, fungus look very different. So we cannot incorporate fungus into animals. Okay, so we needed a broader system of classification. So there we got this five kingdom classifications, where the empires, and cell-wise characteristics, prokaryotes, meaning whose nucleus aren't properly formed, organisms which doesn't have a proper nucleus. Prokaryotes are separate empires, and eukaryotes are separate empires, and all of them can come to a five kingdom, that is Munera. That means uh, first formed organisms, majorly containing bacteria, Moneria, and Protista. These are eukaryotes, but individually living organisms. Then kingdom fungi. Fungi has got all fungus. You can see that here. And we have plant and animal. So these are the five kingdom classification, which is taken up by Whitaker. So what additionally Whitaker thought on over Linnaeus? So Linnaeus could only did classification when he had knowledge of 2000 species. That's all he could get. And what maximum characteristics he included? Attributes of its physiology, anatomy, that's all. But here in this five kingdom classifications, genetics and evolutionary knowledge also comes into play for making a proper classification. Okay. About evolution, we'll learn more about it. So gradually, our overall classification system had turned towards a genetic informations, genetic similarities, and of course, evolutionary. So first we discussed about Monaria kingdom. It's a solitary individual living prokaryotic organisms, and these are majorly bacteria. Protistas are eukaryotic organisms. You can see the nucleus well formed, but they are again individually or singly living organisms, which also contain some algae-like organisms called macroalgae and slime molds. Some protistas are like this. When I say macroalgae, it's actually a single cell. Okay, remember that. It's not multiple cells. So this is a algae type of looking organism, and this is kind of a fungi type of looking organism, but all belongs to Protista. We have plant kingdom. Plant kingdom is very vast. Okay, so which especially these are multicellular eukaryotic organisms, and of course, it do major all plants do photosynthesis, meaning they can produce uh, uh, food out of light. Okay. We have fungi. Fungi are majorly saprophytes, and their cell wall nature contains chitin. Chitin is another form of carbohydrate, but that is what fungus do have. So we have yeast, mucor, and of course mushrooms. They belong to the fungi class of or fungi kingdom of organisms. So they are majorly saprophytes, meaning scavenging organ. They do not have their photosynthetic capability. Dead decaying organisms are majorly eaten up by, you see dead woods, your mushrooms grow on that dead woods, right? So dead decaying organisms can find fungus to grow. Okay. So there's then we can have animals. Animals, they are very large in numbers, not so large than, of course, Monera. But we have a good number of animals, over 1.5 million animals are there, animal species are there. We have discovered as of yet. There are many under deep sea water like this. You haven't discovered. But what is the basic criteria of animals? Um, they are multicellular, of course. Plants are also multicellular, remember that. Metazoas, that's what multicellular organisms are. They are majorly eukaryotic, heterotrophic, okay? They do not do photosynthesis. They majorly reproduce sexually, and of course, uh, they have their eggs, which can turn to a blastula, meaning a spherical. The egg turns spherical and creates a hole inside it, hollow space inside it. Okay, and they do have a digestive system which is very much internal in nature. Okay, they do not digest outside. So, what about general characteristics of plants? Plants do have its own, subclassifications. We have this algae to be one of the plants, liverworts, mosses. These are part of plants, types of plants. One important thing in plants, we have that alternation of generation happens. That's a very unique thing in plants. All plants do have. Okay, so they have a gametophyte generation and a sporophyte generation. Okay, so the total number of chromosomes changes here. And in different species or different classes of plants, they do have different length of these generations. Okay, so how do you classify these plants? These are the overall way we classify these, and these are the characteristics. These are the five kingdoms classifications. You can go through this. This is diversity. We come back to the plant individually, phylum wise. You can see this algae, okay, and algae are multicellular algae, actually majorly multicellular algae. Some are unicellular, you see here, and then we have this sub classification among the algae. There are green algae, chlorophyceae, pheophyceae are brown algae, and red algae, of course. So these are the different. They have different kinds of chlorophyll in the planet. Then we have bryophytes. These are mosses you have seen in during rainy seasons. You see in bricks, you see this velvet-like structures develop. These are actually mosses. Called majorly two types. Uh, liverworts and mosses. These are two types. So this is the bryophytes, and we can make terrariums out of it. Yeah. Then we have pteridophytes, ferns. These are you use in bouquets, you know. So this is another organism. Okay, and they are the organism which starts to seed it. Earlier it was only spores. Now some organisms of the pteridophyte types, they start making seeds. Then we have additional, these are called living fossils called gymnosperms. During dinosaur time, these plants are the maximum number of plants, but now they are very less in number. Okay, pines and of course cycads, these are called gymnosperms. Okay, so their seeds are open. I mean, they aren't closed in a fruit. So that's called naked seed plants. That's called gymnosperms. Then we have angiosperms. Angiosperms, this is the ideal way you can show. All flowering plants you see here, they are called angiosperms. Okay, meaning closed seed. Flowering meaning then food, fruit preparation. Then, so they have got this two generations. You can see that two and gametophyte generations are particularly restricted in the flowers only. Okay, often these are present in a single individual or it is present in two different male female plants also. Okay, so summary of plant kingdom classifications. Okay, then we have another plant kingdom classifications. When we are talking about angiosperms, we have two different types of angiosperms. One are monocot plants and other are dicot plants. Monocot plants are majorly grass-like, and they, when they start germinating, they only have one cotyledon. But in pulses and other plants you see here, the seed germinates and the two parts of the seed get separated, and from that you see these are cotyledons and the root and shoots are developing here. So dicots and monocots. So grass-like plants here, and these are non-grass-like plants, dicots. These are further differences. They do have different vascular bundles. Their way of veins in their leaves are parallel. Here they are radiating, the veins in the leaves. Vascular bundles are very much spread. Here vascular bundles are very much concentrated in the central part. Flowers are of different types here also. Okay, so now we discuss a modification of plant. We just gave you an anecdote of a Hindi movie where the character was playing a botany teacher, and he was actually teaching modifications of leaves, plants, and inflorescence. Here, this is a kind of arrangement of branches and flowers present in a flower. So these are different kinds of arrangements you see here. So majorly, if you remember, marigold, they are kind of capitulated head where the flowers are arranged like that. Okay. Then, if you really discuss the parts of the plant, these are the parts of the plant which can potentially modify to different forms. We have roots, leaves, stem, buds, flowers. Okay, and these are called birds also, apical leaf birds. These are flower buds. Remember that. This is shoot and fruit. This is generally classified. If you know these systems, you can understand the classification also.
Sir,
Yes.
sir, what is meant by acropetal order? Sir, in the previous slide it was there.
What is that?
Sir, in the
That is
next one, in the leaf definition.
okay. Where do you see that?
Sir, sir, leaves originate from shoot apical meristems and are arranged in an acropetal order.
Okay. This is a kind of a triangular order. Uh, Gradually, the smaller leaves are towards the top, and larger leaves are towards the bottom. That's called exotic. Okay.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
I'll take a break. for 5 minutes. Okay, you guys can also take. We will continue the class. Okay.